Great. Thank you all for coming. Let me recap, and I'll hopefully do so in 5 minutes or less, what has happened this past weekend. 20 leaders from Morocco and the United States met at Eastern Mennonite University February 10 to 13 in a quest for better understanding between Morocco's Muslims and America's evangelical Christians. This was at the initiation of the Casablanca Institute, which is co-directed by Dries here at the table, Michael, and myself, as well as others. We are the two co-chairs, but nonetheless, we extended a request to Eastern Mennonite University to host a dialogue with American evangelicals and Moroccan Muslims, and that's what was just held. We had approximately 20 at the table, and we had another 30 plus observers, so our registration was about 55 for total. And it was by invitation only, but it included, very importantly, Dries, who I mentioned, Ambassador Macquar, Morocco's ambassador to the United States, and others such as Ambassador Sefiani, Larbi Belarbi, one of Morocco's most successful businessmen, Karen Thomas Smith, a chaplain at Al Hawain University, a private English language institution in Morocco. We had, from our side, that is, so to speak, the American continent, we had Eric Patterson, who is an assistant director here at the Berkley Center, Rob Schenk, the president of Faith in Action, Michael Kirtley, the president of Friendship Caravan, Rick Love, the president of Peace Catalyst International, and a consultant to Vineyard Churches USA. And to recap, essentially we began with the presentation Thursday night of a movie, Countdown to Zero, which some of you have a copy here. If you don't have a copy already, I would like to give one to you, on the threat to the world posed by the continued existence of massive amounts of nuclear weapons around the world. And after viewing this documentary, we had a panel of participants that included some of us at this table who shared our concerns about nuclear proliferation, and particularly the issue raised by the movie of loose nukes and the imperative to work for peace in order to ensure that the Earth remains habitable for life as we know it. And so if you've not seen the movie, I recommend you watch it. And so from this common ground, a panel then discussed these issues of terrorism, as we both share this concern, both here in the United States as well as in Morocco, and have both been victims of terrorism. It is important to say that the Moroccans, through their speech, through their presence with us and the like, gave presentations the next day, a full day at Eastern Mennonite University in a room not that much bigger than this, but a cozy atmosphere, if you will, to try and come to better understandings. The Moroccans stressing that their society was based upon hundreds of years of largely harmonious relations among Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And they pointed out that the King of Morocco had refused demands to hand Moroccan Jews over to the Nazis during World War II, and sent more than 300,000, if you didn't know this, Moroccans to fight alongside the Allies in World War II. The Moroccan presenters reached back far into history to note that Morocco was the first country to recognize the United States as a sovereign nation in 1777, followed in 1786 by a treaty of peace and friendship. It's the longest unbroken treaty of its kind in U.S. history. The overall message of the meeting was that we did not want this friendship jeopardized and their own society made unstable and less religiously tolerant through misunderstandings created by those who don't understand the friendship and history between our two countries, and who treat Moroccan laws and values with disrespect. They, on the Moroccan side, and many of the Christians on our side, view proselytizing in the way that it's conducted in Morocco as being disrespectful, especially if it's done deceptively in a covert manner after the proselytizer has entered Morocco under other pretenses, such as starting a business or obtaining an education. Among the presentations was one by Dr. Eric Patterson here at the Berkley Center, who presented to all those present the document that some of you have in front of you and which we all had with us in Morocco, namely the Council on Global Affairs from Chicago's Engaging Religious Communities Abroad, a new imperative for U.S. foreign policy. Patterson noting in his statement that religion is often used by extremists as a catalyst for conflict and as a means of escalating tensions, and that insensitivity to this reality has caused bloodshed in many areas of the world. And then after acknowledging the need for sensitivity, Patterson asked that the Moroccan government also recognize that many Christians view talking passionately about their faith as being part and parcel of certain universal human rights, including the right to practice freedom of speech. Patterson's point was enlarged by several other Christian participants, one of whom said, "I don't believe any one religion deserves a privileged place in law, government, or society." Actually, that was me. And I was making it in reference to my own contention that as a believer in pluralism, even covenant pluralism, that here in this country it is wrong for those of us who are evangelicals to insist upon our religion having a privileged place in law, culture, politics, and the like. Our conversation, our discussion over these matters was vigorous, with representatives from the evangelical community challenging the Moroccans to move toward greater openness. I would conclude by saying that the purpose of the 3-day event was not to arrive at agreement among all present, but rather to permit all involved to better understand each other's viewpoints better. And I think the way the meeting was facilitated by both a Christian and Muslim facilitator made that experience possible. That by way of an opening statement to indicate that the Casablanca Institute, which was created just about a year ago in 2010 in Morocco, in Casablanca, is off to a good start in the sense that this is the first public event that the Institute has held. And I would hope that my co-founder, Dries, agrees with that. If you don't, we're in trouble, Dries.
Okay, I agree on that.
Oh, good. I want to just read the statement later. I would like to say one additional comment that has motivated me particularly, and it's the outcome of the 2000 elections, and particularly the post-election American Values Survey that was conducted of around 1,500 American evangelicals after the 2010 elections by Public Religion Research Institute. And if there were any conclusions that are worth noting from this past election, it's the religious trends that you may not have heard of. We all know the political trends, the rise of importance of the Tea Party and the like, but the emerging religious issues raised by the election, according to the survey results, are threefold. Number one, that President Obama's religious views, and particularly attitudes toward Islam and attitudes toward American exceptionalism. Those three issues are the religious trends that were raised and clarified by this last election. And briefly put, regards the first one, and I won't dwell on these, but I'll simply say, a majority of Americans say President Obama has religious beliefs that are somewhat different or very different from their own. And only 4 in 10 believe that President Obama has similar religious beliefs to their own. The second trend that's worth noting is that approximately 2/3 of Republicans, 67%, and those identified with the Tea Party movement, 66%, say the values of Islam are at odds with American values. and less than 1/3 of Democrats agree, 30%, and only about 4 in 10 independents agree. In other words, this attitude, as was demonstrated in the election, is more than enough evidence for those of us who are involved in this dialogue to say just how very, very important this is. Lastly, I think it's important for our American visitors here, but also the Moroccans, to know that 58% of Americans believe that God has granted America a special role in human history. That's a figure that's even higher among evangelicals. In other words, this idea that America has a, quote, special role, and that God has granted the U.S. that special role, is very high. So you put together the figures just enunciated, namely the uncomfortability with the president's religious beliefs, a perception that I believe is incorrect, very incorrect, but nonetheless that the values of Islam are, by significant numbers of Americans, incompatible with Islam, or at least their views are evenly divided over that question, which is frankly astonishing, especially given America's history and tradition of religious freedom. And then lastly, I think a perception that's held true over many, many decades, that God has given America a special role. And I would conclude by saying, if it's given us a special role, it should be that of communicating our religious pluralism and our respect for people of other faith. But we know that doesn't always come through. One of the things I will conclude with by saying that, and I have been saying it for a number of years now, that with the fall of the Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall in 1989, there has been an effort to make Muslims here and abroad into the new evil empire. And that this is not only a huge mistake on a strategic level, playing right into the hands of terrorists, but it's also a violation, a clear violation of biblical ethics, to love God and love our neighbor. And so we have decided, as the new evangelicals, for the common good, to be participants in not just the events in Harrisonburg this weekend, but also here at the Berkley Center. And Catherine, I thank you for hosting us and for your commitment to this subject topic of religious dialogue. So with all of that introduction, I would turn it to Ambassador Macquarie to say what he would like to say. Or my co-founder, Dries.
I think Pastor Davis.
No. I'm here as a guest, and I'm happy to be a guest. I think it's very good, and thank you, Rich, and thank you, Dries, for organizing this. It's very important that people get together to express what they think, what their views are, and try to bridge the differences. And this is what happened in Harrisonburg. We've been working together for a long time, and hopefully we will continue to work together. And I think everything is in your hands, civil society. I think it's the best. Governments, at the end, follow with what their people want. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Macquarie. Thank you, everybody. A lot of thanks for hosting us in this meeting. And thank you, Catherine Marshall, and everybody here. Rich, I think that you have summarized perfectly most of the ideas that were discussed, and you have raised some issues that need, of course, to be discussed further. That's what we will be doing today and in other circumstances. Maybe for one or two ideas, I would have some, I would have some slight differences with your views, but that is normal, and that is the healthy thing to do and to have. I don't want to take the floor for too long. What I would like to stress beyond everything is that what we are doing is proving the movement while we walk. That's the only way to do things. I believe that, and when you have preconceived ideas and you put something in a frame that is definitely fixed, that is well designed, and you believe that this will work, very often it doesn't. Therefore, what we are trying to do is to prove that by creating the Casablanca Institute, which is a good concept, which is a good idea, on which we have been working for a while now, and the outcome, this meeting as an outcome of this beautiful idea, needs to be consolidated. We need now to move to further steps by allowing the Casablanca Institute, having the fundings and having all the necessary tools in order to proceed, and also in order to achieve things that will be that will have more impact. Another thing I would like to stress also is that we need, in every move we make, to be very clear about what we are doing, so that there are no misunderstandings, with no hidden agenda, with no hidden ideas. Everything is put on the floor and discussed freely. We believe in Morocco because we believe that we live in free society. Some people might have other ideas because they can perceive Morocco in the way they perceive it, but my judgment and my experience of a long life now in my country since I was born, I think that I have never felt at any moment that I could not have the ideas I wanted to have. And that's something which is very important. Of course, when you look at the history during the 50 last years or 60 last years, the independence of Morocco, you might feel that there were circumstances where things were more blocked and things that were not allowed that much, and there were even some acts that are reprehensible by moral terms. But you know, the life of states is done with that also, as is the history of the United States shows very clearly in many circumstances, and as how the history of our country and any country shows. But the individuals within this society are the great movers of things, and we believe that we individuals can play a major role, especially nowadays that, you know, with this globalization, with the tools that are that exist now, there is more chance for us to exchange, discuss, talk, debate, while respecting each other's ideas and maybe not coming to common conclusions or to joint actions, because we might have differences, but at least we would debate and discuss. And that is what was achieved mainly in the meeting at the Eastern Mennonite University, thanks to Rich and our host there. Thank you very much.
I'd like Michael Kirtley, who's also a co-founder of the Casablanca Institute, to speak. Then we'll show a few slides, let you get a picture of what happened there. Okay, Michael, here's a microphone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, and the Berkley Center for hosting us. Dries and the ambassadors, is this your first time to be here at the Berkley Center, or?
Yes.
And yours too. I think I hope that you will give us a little visit before we leave, because frankly it's an amazing place, and certainly for future events this is certainly a partner that would be amazing to work with, and Catherine has been a good friend of everything we're trying to do. First of all, what I want to say, just to add to the very eloquent explanations that Rich and Dries and the ambassador gave to us, is number one, that Eastern Mennonite University itself, represented by its president and by many other people there who facilitated us, were really partners, complete partners in making our exchanges the most the most fruitful possible, and certainly they deserve a lot of credit for whatever positive outcomes that took place there. Also, one thing I wanted to, on a personal note, notice is, even though all of the people there in Harrisonburg, most of them didn't know each other from the Christian side and from the Moroccan Muslim side, I noticed a fellowship, and certainly most of all, what I noticed is that how people were similar to one another, much more than they were different, both in their ways of discussion, but also, I would say, in their ideas. Another thing that is important to notice, because I know that Catherine and Rich have both been part of creating the Chicago Council document on faith in foreign policy, that Ambassador Nuruddin Sefiani gave a response to the Chicago Council document that was I think, quite important and would deserve to be read and deserve to be understood better. I think perhaps the most important element that he brought out in his response was the need to, perhaps there's a certain feeling that whether or not there were Muslims or Christians or Jews that on the Chicago Council, that the people who created that document were mainly Americans, and that there's a feeling that in terms of creating this ability to reach out in foreign policy on faith-based issues, that it's also very important to consult not only with religious leaders, but also because many people in the Muslim world are cultural leaders and civil society leaders, to consult directly with the people in those countries before making sweeping theories about how to approach. So that consultation with the Islamic world overseas is a very important part of that, I think, and sort of an egalitarian or an equal approach. I think also that it's important to note that there was a very spirited conversation especially on Saturday morning, about questions of religious freedom and even what the word proselytizing might mean, or also how different laws and different cultures interpret the advent of people of different religions into their societies. Particularly, I think what's important to note is that Reverend Karen Smith, who has been working for decades inside Morocco as a chaplain and as a Christian religious leader from the evangelical persuasion, made an impassioned appeal to other evangelicals, where she made a point of saying we need to be very careful about what she called covert evangelism, and I think that this I think was a kind of an interesting turning point and a very important part of the conversation that we need to think about. And Dries made a very interesting response when the question was raised about how people think about the law in Morocco and how that people think about changing the law in Morocco. And one of the points he made is that whatever happens, that laws change from within, they don't change from without. And I think that's about all I can add, except that there's no doubt that another thing that appeared, I think, is that right now Morocco seems to be a very good partner in this kind of dialogue, partly because of the long history of tolerance and openness to other faiths, but also, as Rich pointed out, because of the relationship, the strong relationship that Morocco has historically held with America. Thank you.
We do have a few photos. We do have a few photos, and so I'm not sure we've succeeded in getting them into a slideshow, but they're not many, just about a dozen, but we thought we'd show you. So you might have a little picture of where we were at.
And enough of me.
Pardon me? And enough of Dries up there. So here's our ambassador. One of the guests representing Muslims here in the United States was the Director of Interfaith Relations for ISNA, the Islamic Society in North America. That's Dr. Saeed, and that's who you see on the screen. Well, that's... interestingly enough, the man on the right is John Fairfield, and he is not just a scholar and a professor at the university, but he's also the creator of the Rosetta Stone.
No.
Really?
Co-founder, I'm sorry.
Really?
Co-founder.
Of the language?
Yes, of the language. Co-founder of Rosetta Stone. And he apparently is working on more software. The man you see at the... the man you see at the standing in the picture is the president of Eastern Mennonite University. And this is Ambassador Sefiani, and then seated to his right in the screen is Karen Smith. And this is our friend Rick Love, who's the president of Peace Catalyst International, and a consultant also to Vineyard, and you know who that is, looking rather intense, very intense, and then pondering, very thoughtful.
Pondering you being intense.
Pondering me being intense is none other than Michael Curley. And this was our conference room. You can see it there. I guess that's it. I think what we could do is open it up to any questions, observations by any of the other participants. I know that one of our interests as part of the new Evangelical Partnership for the Common Good is reaching out to young people. One of my anecdotes about who are the new evangelicals is that I was leaving the capital of the United States to go to the Cannon House office building one day a few months back when I ran into, in the middle of the sidewalk between the two, Representative Frank Wolf. And Congressman Wolf asked me what I was doing. I told him I was creating the new evangelicals. And he responded, well, what's wrong with the old evangelicals? And I said, well, would you like an explanation right here and now in the middle of the sidewalk? And he says, well, it can wait. And we are old friends, and yet we do disagree on some things. But one thing is clear, is that the new evangelicals, I say, are the future. And one of those younger evangelicals is with us. And so would you care to say something? Gerald David Bennett. So I'm calling you unexpectedly. But I think we are a movement that encompasses not just the young and the old, because as I explained to Representative Wolf, it's not whether you're young or old. It's not a matter of age. It's a matter of attitude. And there are some differences, and I'm not sure Gerald would characterize all those differences, but he may characterize some. And so by introducing him, you may then be more inclined to ask him questions. So I'll pass the mic on to you, Gerald.
Wow, this is unexpected, but like I said, I am an independent scholar, and I've been really interested in religion and world affairs and how it plays out. I've taken some religion classes in school and realized there are many different types of religion. I would say that I feel, again, that there are many types of religion. That religion, I guess, is man's own way of understanding God. I feel that people should be free to express their own beliefs, whether we agree with them or not, as long as they don't have a negative effect on society.
Why don't you tell us your reactions to the event? How you perceived it, or?
I think this was a really important event down in Harrisonburg. I think it was very important to have Muslim or Islamic views along with evangelical Christian views. I think we need to have more open discussion. I think it is definitely, it was really productive. I think a lot of questions were asked and answered about stereotypes of both faiths, namely the negative perception of many Islamic people. Again, I think we only had 4 or 5 young people out there, young adults, and we kind of all flocked together, I guess you could say, and kind of discussed things among ourselves. But we realize that this has been a problem, the misunderstanding of religion, and that we need to open up the dialogue more across the globe on ways to come together and understand each other better.
That's good. Thank you, Gerald. Why don't we just open it up to comments or questions, and we'll try and pass a mic around for those who want to do one or the other, comment or question. Yes.
I was very sorry that I could not be part of this event, but I had another meeting, and you can't be in two places at once. I tried. But
You're pretty good at that.
there was no way physically to get from New York to EMU in time. So I would be very grateful if you could give us a little bit more sense of what the issues were and how you emerged. In a sense, reading this draft press release, which is what you were talking from, I get more of a sense of the way in which the Christians who were there saw the issues of respect and religious freedom than I did of how the Moroccans were there. Now, the Berkley Center, as you probably know, has many years of working on the questions of interfaith dialogue, but also more specifically of the Muslim world and the West, because we were part of the World Economic Forum group of 100. Several of us were part of that. And there is, for a start, an asymmetry, which I sense is to some extent echoed in the group here, which is when you talk about Islam and the West, you're talking about a geographic area and a religion, which don't really fit together. In a sense, there are, of course, Muslims living all over the world, so that it sets up an inaccuracy, but it is part of the general discourse. So in this case, you have clearly people who approach this as Moroccans, people who approach it as Americans, but also people who were approaching the issues quite specifically as Christians, and Christians with a particular focus. So what emerged from that? What are the real problems? Okay, we know that there were a few people thrown out of orphanages. How much of a problem is that? It was a year ago. I've never read anything since. Is that something that's upset a lot of people? I know that I have a variety of different contacts with Morocco, and one of the things that I've heard is that there is a concern that people in Morocco have read something into a change in language from a discussion that there are a few Christians, because there are not very many in Morocco, to a Christian minority, and that this is understood to reflect some kind of a broader design, which I must say to me seems completely far-fetched, but as we were saying before, if perceptions matter, is that a common perception? Is that a sense that people are afraid of? The other thing that I didn't get a sense of is Moroccan Islam is very special. I mean, Moroccan Islam is distinctive. It has the Sufi quality, but it's part of this deep misunderstanding that you've reflected of what Islam is and its diversity, its complexity, the richness of its heritage, and the ideas that in that sense Morocco is a very special place to convey that. And I'm curious as to whether that was part of the discussion and how that came through. So what were you guys really talking about is the question.
Dries, do you want to respond?
Well, first of all, I have to say that a lot of things were discussed. One of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that happened. In other words, there was the option of having a camera record the events of Friday morning that began with the presentation of the Chicago Council document by Eric Patterson, the response by a former Moroccan ambassador, Nuruddin. There was the opportunity to record that, as well as the subsequent conversation about religious freedom as we understand it and define it. But we decided against doing that so that we would have as much freedom to talk candidly, openly about our feelings, our beliefs, our understandings. And so the conversation was facilitated, it's important for those of you who weren't there to know, in such a fashion to get at what are our deepest differences about subjects such as religious freedom and belief itself. And so we were surrounded over the course of the 2 days by a recitation on big poster boards around us of what was being said so that we could follow a progression. And I think what would be helpful is if we, probably in a report about this, even stated what those 3 questions were and how we were led by a progression, with the first question being, what is your understanding of religious freedom? To the last question being, what do you see as the outcome, the future for partnerships? And what does partnership mean? So that I think it's a tribute to the facilitators that we moved in a process. I happen to think, for example, that people change their minds in a process. And I know that because I've changed my mind about some things. And that transactional process is frankly, what we all do when we move from deny, and I call these the 5 Ds, from deny, that is to say there isn't a problem, to deliberate, to say, oh, there is a problem here and we need to deliberate it, to design, which is to say, I may change, to changing, which is doing, and then having made the shift in thinking to defending. And there's never a done. But that process from deny to deliberate to design, I think I will change. To doing, that is changing the way you have think about something and then behaving accordingly, and defending that change is a process which I happen to think is going to be important in changing all minds on these topics. So I'm not sure that's an answer specifically to your question, except to say that we were led through a process, Catherine, that would enable us to most deeply understand the differences that do exist. And to look at those differences and similarities to move to a realistic appraisal and understanding of what this partnership might mean. That would be my answer to that question, but I'll turn it over to my friend Dries.
Thank you very much. Along with that, what I would like to stress are 3 major aspects on which we have been, sharing views and talking. The first one might not come exactly into the scope of your question, but it is important, and because you participated to the first one, Catherine Marshall. The first night we saw that movie about nuclear proliferation and the dangers of that. And I believe that we discussed that also with the audience. And I think that that was a very good idea to put in the agenda such thing, because these are the types of things like the climate change we discussed and you participate very actively in, on which we could share views and very easily come to some common conclusions and see that we are working together, Muslims and Christians, for the benefit of whole humanity. And that is important, to do things together. That was the first. I don't want to elaborate too long in order not to take the floor for too long, but that is very important, and I believe that the Casablanca Institute could play an important role at this respect. Second point is that, and this goes in the same direction as the Chicago report, which was commented by my friend Nordin Sfiani, Ambassador Sfiani. It is important nowadays to take account of something we have been, in particular in Morocco, saying for a long time: religion is important in international relations. You cannot do without it. Whether you like it or not, whether you are religious or not, religion is an important factor, an important element, if not the most important element in international relations. And I think that we have been, for many reasons, well, I don't want to go into too much details and too much analysis of this, but it has been already, there have been a lot of books and a lot of articles and analysis made about that. Religion is certainly one of the key factors for understanding what's going on in the present international relations, and certainly one of the most important factors if we want to come to more peace and to more stability in international relations in the coming years. That is the second point, which our meeting also, not necessarily saying it again and again and repeating it as I'm saying now, but just by the mere fact that we are together there at the Mennonite University, talking together, we show that this is an important matter. My third point has more to do with answering your preoccupation. It comes under the title of religious freedom. Of course, we have been discussing this matter. Maybe not always in very clear terms. We have done it to a certain extent. And that's an important point. We believe in religious freedom. And you, of course, believe in religious freedom. By the way, when we visited Jefferson's house, it was great to see that this is one of the elements that counted in his philosophy when he wrote the American Declaration of Independence, and that's something we fully share. Now, what do we all mean by religious freedom is the question, because at this respect, we might have sometimes some slight differences, not differences in the main meaning of that. I believe that we are very, very close in that. We mean the same thing, basically. There is one point in which maybe something can be said, and this has to do with, states and social organization of people. We live in a society which has its own organization. The values we share together are basically the same, you and us. We believe in democracy, but you perfectly know that democracy also has different meanings, and you have to tailor it in such a way as to fit the necessities and the realities of the country in which it is practiced. Otherwise, you're meaning nothing. You are just saying that there is some abstract thing that needs to be applied, but then to whom? To abstract people, abstract countries? That's impossible. It's real people you're dealing with, and real societies. So is religious freedom. In Morocco, Muslims, I have been saying that quite a few times during the meeting, and some other friends of mine, some colleagues, Moroccans also said that. There are some concepts we never met across our education and in our families. Things maybe have changed a little bit these last years. But for instance, the concept of dawah, which we discussed, it's for me a surprise. It has always been a surprise. It has never been part of Moroccan tradition. We do not do any dawah. Dawah meaning, for those who do not understand what it means, is the action, proselytization of, I don't, this word I'll never pronounce it correctly. Forget about it. Maybe because I resist to that. Anyhow, it is, we don't use that. It is used in Saudi Arabia, it is used in Libya, it is used in some countries, and there are organizations who are in charge of that. But what we do is just that we, in Morocco, we live our religion. We are, a lot of people go to mosque, a lot of people fast, almost everybody does that, and we practice our religion normally, smoothly, with no attempt at all to make others change their views and become Muslims. That's not our concern. Our concern is just to live our religion peacefully without no limitation. And our constitution and our people, and that was also stated during the meeting, do protect and do make it clear that any Christian who lives in Morocco does what he wants. As far as his religion is concerned, any Jew, and examples you have cited a moment ago, Rich, about the protection of Jews during the World War II and this period, all these conquer to the same objective. It's here where comes this question about what was called deportation of some evangelicals in Morocco. But that was, and as I explained it, I think Michael a moment ago referred to that. I think it's necessary to, again, to stress it in order to make things clear. Societies are governed by laws. Our society is governed by laws, as is yours. And you cannot imagine that someone comes and tells you you have to change your laws according to my desire. In America, it's according to the American people's desire. And any law is the outcome of social realities and give and take, interest, negotiation, argumentation. All this leads you to have a law, a new law if you want to have a new law. But it's your own business. The law at this present stage in Morocco does not permit proselytization. I'll say it at the end. It doesn't permit it. Whether that's good or bad can be a matter of discussion. But that's the present state. Some said, why don't you change the law? And the answer is clear. You don't change the laws like that because someone else from abroad tells you change it, or someone from inside says change it. You need to have a society which is in a position to accept that change of law. If you don't have it, what are you creating? You are creating exactly the situation you want to avoid, which is that of intolerance and the reaction that could break the society apart. And that could lead to antagonism and maybe to the contrary thing you want to achieve, which is more peaceful relations between religions and between people and countries. And that is a very important point we made clear during the discussion. This shows how far we have been and how clearly we have discussed about things. It doesn't mean that we believe that our law is the best. It is the law for the moment being. Time will change a lot of things. Look at the United States history. I didn't say it, but this came to my mind later. Slavery. When we visited Jefferson's, you had to go through a war in order to change the law. Do you want us to go into a war, internal war, in order to change the law? I believe we should avoid that. If we can do it in a different manner, that's better. And I believe it's possible in a different manner by maybe letting things evolve and mature as they should. That's all.
Just to add.
Suggesting changing the law?
Yeah. People here. No, but apart from Congressman Wolf, you have some people on the Hill who called me and said the International Covenant says that this is part of the human rights, which is not true. It's just an interpretation, because if you read the covenant, it doesn't say that. But anyway, just imagine one day, think, somebody from the government decides, or somebody in Morocco decides that the law has to be changed and puts a project of law.
But you sense pressure on this.
No, but some people here called me for this, but which is, I told them this is, I mean, I didn't even answer. I mean, but imagine, just think 1 second. Somebody has the idea. Dries says, proselytizing should be allowed. And he proposes a change in the law. First of all, he will do it? Okay. No, they won't. But what will happen is that there will not be one vote for it in the parliament. Not one. I'm not saying the majority or the minority. I'm saying there will not be one vote, and people will say, are you crazy or what? You see? Laws are passed by the parliament. It's not just the prime minister or whoever decides to change the law. All right?
I would like to follow up first. Do you want to follow up? Okay.
Just to add to that.
Michael, just a clarification, because that's important clarification about the law in particular. I want to make, if you allow me. Why did I insist on that point? Because maybe, as your question makes me necessarily respond to that. Because there is a reference to the freedom of speech. And a part of the freedom of speech is precisely to proselytize. If you understand freedom of speech in a complete and full, total manner, why shouldn't you say to others, come and join me? And that's why I reacted. Thank you.
Thank you, Dries. I think that it would be false to give the impression that this discussion that we're having right now was the major discussion at the event. I want to make that clear. We discussed mainly about perceptions, about working together on certain common goals, such as anti-terrorism, such as the environment and humanitarian work and things like that, and foreign policy. But on this particular issue, what's really important, I think, that also came out is that perhaps this question is misplaced. Certainly this was discussed. The question of Morocco needs to act this way or whatever is also a question of society, which Dries brought out very, very often. And the example was given here in America of a Christian man in Harrisonburg who decided, a Christian young man, a teenager, who decided that he was going to be a Muslim for a month. And he was persecuted. He was persecuted by the people of Harrisonburg around him to such an extent that he felt threatened. This is a very interesting witnessing that was given there. So sometimes, as we say, it's not just a question of law. It's also a question of society reaction and how the society can deal with certain situations. Now, as Dries said, this may not be right. Certainly we cannot say that it's right that the people of Harrisonburg persecute a young boy because he decides to say he's Muslim. And we might not, and we might not be able to say it's always right exactly how Moroccans act towards certain situations. But you cannot remove the society and the world situation from the direct situation on the ground. And that brings back your question, are we talking about Islam versus the West? That's a very important and very interesting part of this discussion. And I think that the reason that we say that is that it goes back to what Rich said at the beginning, that today in the West, it's not considered Morocco, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. It's considered the Islamic world. And to such an extent that I've even had this discussion many times in recent weeks with people who have talked to me about Morocco, and they've said they've had discussions with their friends who say Morocco is like Saudi Arabia, for example. So this notion that there are blocks in the Islamic world may be true, but is not perceived.
So one of our intents in holding the event was to help clarify those differences. And I would, in response to my friend and co-director Dries, say that we do have so much more in common on these subjects than we do differences. When it comes to the social practices and the rest of faith. But on a theological level, I think it's important as an evangelical to be honest with you to say that when it comes to our religiously grounded differences, which are often the most important to each of us, those deeply felt religious beliefs, those differences are ultimate and at times irreducible. And thus the question becomes, if that's so, how do we live with our deepest differences when those impact societies and cultures? How do we live with our deepest differences? And I would say that on those questions, disagreements can be understood as an achievement. I'll repeat that. Disagreements can be understood as an achievement. And yet how we discuss and disagree is so very important to the achieving of a just and a good society. And I think that it's important for evangelicals to understand, so I will repeat it in case there's a reporter present, that the best approach to achieving civility is not always to try to reach a consensus on everything, or some kind of mythical common core that we all agree on, as much as it is setting up a framework, a mutually agreed upon framework or covenant or charter within which those important differences can be negotiated and settled peacefully. And so one of the assumptions, at least in my mind, in the creation called the Casablanca Institute, is that we might find through the auspices of this creation an agreed upon framework that will prevent these differences from boiling over and becoming open conflict or division within societies, either in Morocco or here. And so we know from the Chicago Council report that extremists use religion as a catalyst at times for violence. The morning papers report that just in the capital of Afghanistan this morning there was a terrorist bombing. It's all too real, all too present on a daily basis in certain places of the world. That there are those who use religion as a catalyst. But we believe, consistent with this report, and frankly, this conversation that we've had in Harrisonburg and with the Moroccans is, to my knowledge, as a co-director, I'm called a co-chair of the Chicago Council document, and just having met with Scott Appleby at Notre Dame in a discussion about nuclear weapons out there, that we together, Appleby and myself, we see this conversation with Morocco as one of the first of its kind, of this engaging of religious communities abroad. So that's why it is really important. And so we're trying to find a way in which we together can be the shock absorbers, if you will, to prevent those who would use religion in the wrong way for purposes that we would disagree with from succeeding.
I have one more, but you go first.
No, go ahead.
No. Well, let me just ask you again. I'm trying to get a sense of how big an issue this is, and I share all the views that are here. We had a meeting with a completely different country and a different religion that was in Bangladesh, and there was a man from Sri Lanka who pulled out a book, which was written by somebody in World Vision. And it was a fantastic anthropological study of Buddhist societies all over the world. But at the bottom of every page, there was a chart of what percentage of people had heard the gospel and what percentage had accepted it. And it certainly made it look as if there was a target of evangelizing, and that this was viewed as deeply offensive. It was viewed as deeply offensive in itself, but it was also viewed, and this is where I come in personally, and I hear very much what you say about covert or not visible. In other words, people who are not being straightforward. But is there a sense that that kind of thing is happening? I had never heard it in Morocco, so that's why I'm curious. And I've had a long dialogue with World Vision, by the way, about this, and they're changing their policies. It's very complex. They have 44,000 people, so that they all behave differently. But that was the perception.
Okay. Saida, can you talk about what the head of the Protestant church told you?
After the event of the deportations,
By the way, deportations, Americans have been deported, 25 put on a non-re-entry list. So we're not talking about hundreds of hundreds.
So a group of reverends from different organizations and went to Morocco to meet with the officials and find out for themselves and check on the churches. And one of the meetings we had was with the representative of the Protestant church in Casablanca. He's been there for, I think it was something like 12 years or so, and he was leaving in July. And he told us that 5 years before these events happened, he went to the Moroccan authorities and told them that there will be some problems down the line because there are some people that come into the country that they pretend to be opening businesses, and their objective is actually to evangelize. There are churches in the United States especially that put a lot of money that would go to Morocco for these people to be able to go wherever they want and be able to buy whoever they want for the reasons or for the purposes of converting. The authorities just looked at him and he was so frustrated. He said, nobody wanted to listen to me because this is our tradition. We do accept Christian organizations to come to Morocco and help us out. These people are great people, sweet people. All they want to do is help. So we do accept them. We accept them as we give them the authorization to function as NGOs, and they go and work. And he said, they don't come to work. They come to create problems. And he said, the reason why, this is Jean-Luc, he left actually in July because that was the end of his contract. He said, the reason why I came to tell you is because you have to be extremely careful. Next time you have foreigners that would come and they would say they would set up businesses, you have to follow them up. And then they have, if they are Christians from any, whether they're Catholics or Protestants or Greek Orthodox, they have to register with us. The reason why, he said, I'm thinking more about us. The official representation of Christian churches in Morocco are actually the victims of these churches that sent missionaries to Morocco. He said now people are very scared. Christians in Morocco are very scared. It's like, what is going to happen to us? We came here, we're not converting anybody, we're doing businesses, or some of them are actually not even Christians. They don't belong to any denominations, but they do business. So they're kind of like, they said the first victims of these evangelical churches in Morocco are the official churches in Morocco. And he said, we want to protect that. And I went to the Moroccan authorities to ask them to do that, and they didn't want to do anything. He said, it took a long time. It took 5 years. He said, I was expecting this problem to happen a while back, but it's about time. And then he started telling me about all the people that are supposed to leave the country and they're still there.
But the example of this guy who wanted to create the
Oh, yeah. He said he was alarmed because there was a guy who came from Nigeria, and he said he wanted to create a computer school and bring computers to the poor areas of Morocco and teach the children how to use computers. And he said he didn't see him for 3 years. And one time during Christmas, he met him and he asked him, he said, oh, how is your business going? You know how big the company is now? And he said, what business? He said, the computer school you were supposed to open. He said, oh, come on, man. He said, what computer? I'm not even computer literate. You know why I'm here. And that's when he actually went to the authorities and told them to be careful about the people that come in.
Karen Smith from the chaplain of Bahomet, she herself said that many covert proselytizers are coming to Morocco, and this is what she said. And she asked, well, it's written, this is what the Rich read.
I would like to add one thing. I'm not a theologian like Rich and some other friends, I don't know if this is an advantage or an inconvenience, but I am a Muslim. I live in a Muslim country, and I believe in God, I believe in Islam. And I think that I don't need to proselytize. That's not something which is part of my... But I understand very clearly that someone who is in a different position, whether Muslim or evangelical, would have that kind of preoccupation because he sees what is right and what is wrong according to his religion, and he can... we have a lot of people who could... theologians, although there are different views. I refer to my father and my family. They were theologians, and they were actually prominent theologians in my country. They never asked any Christian to become Muslim. The opposite. They would talk with Christians and say, well, that's your view. I believe in Jesus. We believe in Jesus. So there is no matter. That's not something, that's not an issue for us. And this is maybe something difficult to grasp from the evangelical point of view. We accept that as long as it does not create problems in our country, because then, and this I can say something about it as the ambassador and other people in my country, we are responsible for the stability of our country, we're responsible for what's going on there, and we are responsible for being always within the rule of law. There is a law, it has to be respected until it is changed. Now, the change of law, as I said, is linked to so many other issues. That is not to say that that was the main topic discussed, but it was raised, and it was behind the scene topic. So sometimes it's better to say things than to keep them hidden, because if they are hidden, everyone goes with the false impression. And I will always, as far as I'm concerned personally, and I think all my fellow countrymen, I have the same position, I believe. It's better to say things clearly in order to avoid having a double language, in order to go into a false direction. I want the Casablanca Institute to succeed. It's a beautiful idea, but we have to be very clear on certain issues. If we're not clear on these issues, we won't go very far. We'll have to stop things. So if there are one or two issues that can be that complex and that difficult to handle immediately, let them apart. Let's handle issues that are of an easier reach, and from there we can move to other more complex issues.
Thank you. Wow. It's such a privilege to be able to hear this kind of honesty. Earlier on in the meeting, before you all candidly raised this dilemma, I was going to walk away from the meeting, being very confused. What was it that was discussed? And thanks to, Catherine, for helping me understand as a Muslim. I'm not a Moroccan. What may have been the ultimate dilemma? So prior to that, I was hearing you were talking about this engagement report, which is basically pushing American foreign policy in a direction. You were talking about issues on a social level, transformation, your 4Ds. You were talking about this bilateral relations between Morocco at a societal level and evangelicals. So there was so many things. So I was just wondering what was actually really going on. But now having heard this, and I understand as an outsider, as a person who's not affiliated with the embassy, as a Muslim who comes from Egypt and have done a lot of work, I understand to some degree the dilemma that maybe our Christian friends are raising. In Egypt, there are 17 Protestant churches that are under the umbrella of the Presbyterian Church. And nobody can, by law, can create a new church without permission. Now, this is prior to last week, but law has not changed yesterday. Yes, and it's not going to change. It's very hard for another Christian organization to come in and create their own presence there without going through Egyptian law. And for our Christian friends, it's a very hard thing to understand and to accept. But I'm hearing, what my question then, I guess, goes to, again, to our Christian friends. How hard is it to accept that right now, what Mr. Idris is saying and what our ambassador is saying? How hard is, why can't we get to what I found were the really serious problems? When you, Reverend Cizik, mentioned that 68% of evangelical Christians believe that Muslims are actually, I'm not sure what the reference is, but don't share a lot in common with Americans, that concerns me very much, because my children are living among those Americans. Those are their friends. So my question to you is, if, and again, I know you need to have this conversation with the Moroccan, how can we, I don't want to grow up in a world, have my children grow up where that is the future, where the Tea Party believes I shouldn't be here. How can we get to common ground on that? That is the concern. We don't want to feel alienated here. Not only do we not want to be misunderstood, I mean, you know, putting us all together in this category, as you mentioned, of, you know, how can we say what happens in Saudi Arabia? It's very complex what happens within Saudi Arabia. To even distinguish and say, oh, Morocco is different and Saudi Arabia is different, these are huge complexities. I'm talking about how in America, how can we feel so comfortable with each other that these ideas won't grow and our children don't feel alienated. These young people feel alienated from my children. So I'm sorry, I'm actually taking the conversation away from what, you know, Catherine, you know, brought. But I know that's the dilemma our Moroccan Muslims are feeling here. But the other dilemma that I'm hearing is, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose you and walk away and I never get to speak with you again.
Let me try to answer that question by saying that in my mind, there are three models that you can have for the relationship between faith, culture, and society and politics here in this country. And one of those models is described as a sacred public square. That is to say that one religion dominates and determines what the rules are. And we know that there are substantial percentages of Americans who not only believe, as was evident from the poll I explained, that America has a special place in the world, but substantial percentages of American, particularly evangelical Americans, have a notion of a sacred public square in their mind. And what is that? It is that the values of Christianity will dominate. We saw that manifested in the very words moral majority, the creation of the late Reverend Jerry Falwell in the late 1970s. It was intended to be a moral majority of our views. That's the first model. There is a second model that was described by the late Catholic priest Richard John Newhouse as a naked public square. That is, where a kind of legal secularism prevails. And the society becomes naked in his characterization because secularism prevails. And religion is relegated to a second-class status. And there are those who are the more aggressive atheists in America, secularists, if you will, who do want there to be a public square void of religious values. Because that's what they believe, as secularists, should be the norm for everybody. I happen to subscribe to a third view called a civil public square. And as part of that civility I've described, in which we have deep, deep respect for people of other faiths, not just religiously but otherwise, we acknowledge that no one faith, mine nor yours if you're a Muslim, or if you're a Buddhist, a Hindu, or the fastest growing group in America, no religion, about 16%, no one should have a privileged place in the law and politics of the country. That is what covenant pluralism is. That's pluralism. I believe that the covenant part of it is that we all agree together that no one should have a privileged place. But let's be clear. The voices that have spoken recently on a variety of matters, presidential candidates, particularly within the Republican ranks, they subscribe to a sacred public square, and it should be Christianity. And you see that. It's evident from all they say. It's deeply rooted in their value system. And so the idea of covenant pluralism, that we would agree together, may seem far-fetched for those of you looking on the outside. Let me give you one quick little illustration that is not new. But in the early 1980s, Ronald Reagan proposed a school prayer amendment. And that was an amendment that was in response to the 1962 and 63 Supreme Court decisions, Engel v. Vitale, Abington v. Schimpf, which outlawed organized school prayer. In other words, one case, in the Abington case, it was a New York Regent's prayer that was read over the school address system each morning. It was a rote prayer, happened to be, I think, a Catholic prayer. But nonetheless, the school prayer amendment proposed by the former President Reagan was an attempt to reverse those Supreme Court decisions in 62 and 63. And it came as a huge surprise to the Reagan administration when the National Association of Evangelicals proposed an amendment to the amendment that said no government entity shall have any influence or content, no influence over the content of prayer. And the White House said, well, that's a killer amendment. What do you mean, no governmental influence upon the form or content of prayer? That's just the opposite of what the amendment intends to do. And we said, duh. And the most surprising thing may be to you that this amendment was then later, within a year, adopted by the Reagan administration. But nonetheless, government, and indeed the higher-ups of the Reagan administration, changed their mind because of all the people in the United States who should have wanted to reverse Engel v. Vitale, Abington v. Schimpf. It was the evangelicals. And yet here was the foremost evangelical in this association in America saying, now wait a minute. Just because there are evangelicals who believe that their sacred canopy, their belief should be the majority belief, doesn't mean that we should have a right to push it upon others. And it was sufficient enough for the NAE, which I have worked for 29 years, to say that, to, in effect, derail the steam out of the school prayer amendment on Capitol Hill, such that Congressman Istuk from the Midwest and Congressman Dannemeyer from California got on a plane, flew to the NAE meeting in Orlando, Florida, insisted on speaking in spite of not even being on the program. Well, anyway, we gave them the right to speak. They heard they made their piece. We heard them and insisted on the position we'd taken. So that's just one little illustration, and yet it's, it's 31 years now down the road from that. But it was an evidence that American evangelicals are in transition, and I would suggest in so many ways it's like a chess table with all the players now moving. And because all the players on the chess table are moving and it's not clear where they're going to land, it's incumbent upon those of us who do have a voice to enunciate this notion of civility and a civil public square. Because there are those who do have an agenda that's very different, and it's motivated by an anti-Muslim bigotry. And let's be clear also, that was one of the rationales for holding the event. It wasn't just to speak to overseas problems. Thus, Dr. Said was invited, as were very conservative Christians, to this event, in order that we may send a clear voice, as I said clearly, that the Muslims here and abroad are not the new evil empire. And as someone who had a hand in Ronald Reagan's evil empire speech, in fact, Some would say I proposed it because I wrote a letter to the White House asking for the speech and met with the speechwriters, and it was delivered to the association on March 6th of 1983. I had some hand in what happened, albeit a small one. I have a reason, a rationale to say that Islam is not the new evil empire. Far from it. In fact, Islam, as evidenced by this document and the 30 scholars who testified that they agree with it, religion is not the problem. Religion is part of the solution.
Thank you, Rich. I have to go because I have a meeting at 12 o'clock, so I'll be late, as usual. But it happens that we believe in Morocco that there should be, how did you call it, religious pluralism? It's exactly what we have in Morocco, and this is what we want to keep. We have tens of thousands of Christians who live in Morocco. We have Muslims, we have Jews, and this has been going on forever. And we have more and more Christians because Morocco is becoming the Florida of Northern Europe, and everybody's coming there and settling and retiring in Morocco. When we talk about religious pluralism, and this is why we want to keep it, and we want to keep a good relation between Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and keep the situation as it is. This is why we believe that nothing should happen that will put in jeopardy that balance that exists. And this is why proselytizing is so dangerous, and this is why we oppose it. About religious pluralism, you know that we changed the family law a few years ago. And when we changed the family law, it was basically for Muslims. I know for a fact that the King of Morocco called the leader of the Jewish community and asked him whether he wanted to change. It was an opportunity to change the family law within the Jewish community. This is off the record. The leader of the Jewish community told him, please don't raise that question. We don't want to go there. This is just to show how religious pluralism exists in Morocco, and we wanted to keep it that way, and we want to keep peace between all the religions as it has been going on for centuries. If you bring something that will destabilize the situation or break the balance, it's very dangerous. And proselytizing will break the balance, because then you will have reactions. And this is exactly what we saw. Deportations last year happened because people were starting to react. And you will have reactions, and then it will not be reactions against the proselytizers only. It will become reactions against the Christians or against whoever. And that's exactly what we do not want. For centuries, Muslims didn't try to convert the Jews, and Jews didn't try to convert Muslims. And this is why we live together perfectly well for centuries. Let's keep it that way. Down the road, we will see, but for the moment, it will be highly, highly destabilizing and highly dangerous to break that balance. And by the way, just for the record, it's not happening only. It didn't happen only for Christians, but we had problems of proselytizing, and we shut down 130 schools that had been teaching Wahhabi Islam, and that's not the Moroccan Islam. As you know, in Morocco it's a Maliki Islam. And we shut down an Iraqi school that was teaching Shia Islam. And we know for a fact that there were proxies of the Iranian embassy in Morocco that were working to try to convert people into Shia. It's not that we have any problems with the Shia or with the Wahhabis. The problem that we have is that we want to keep the balance as it is in Morocco, and that's because that is very important for the stability of the country and the civic life between the different religions and different people. And it has been working. Why try to fix it if it ain't broke? Thank you. And I apologize, but I have to go. Thank you, Rich. Don't move.
And it's just a continuation of what you said and then the response. Your three models, then you said the fourth, a civil public square, deep respect for others, but no one faith is privileged. Works here very well. Do you like that model, and how would you summarize the different options in the Islamic world and what is working? I mean, I understand the... Okay, but in Morocco, what are the options that are there, and then you're sticking with, like, can you reduce it to some sort of a similar phrase, some sort of, that kind of clarifies religion in society, and, I don't know, like some sort of a similar condensed statement, deep respect for others, but no one faith is privileged. 'Cause, I mean, it appears that Islam is privileged, from my own personal experiences, which was, I worked for a school that had a lot of undercover missionaries. So, and it was dishonest and I left, but nonetheless, I'm still looking for a, yeah, I used to work for George Washington. Sure.
That's a very good question, and I would like the answer to it too. I may have some suspicions about the answer is, but I'm not sure I have it so precisely defined as I would like. I mean, whatever the answer is, that's the answer. I'm not trying to prejudice.
Well,
well, rephrase the question.
Sure.
I think the question he's asking is, here in America, there is no dominant religion.
No, that's what Rich is saying.
That's what Rich is saying. And then, is that the case in Morocco?
Yeah.
Okay, I can answer.
Well, one has to start with the very important and crucial thing that exists in Morocco. Morocco is definitely a Muslim country by constitution. It's not only a fact of society living in a certain way where people could have whatever religion they could have. Morocco is a Muslim country. In the preamble of the Moroccan constitution, that is what is said. Why this preamble, which was put in the Moroccan constitution goes back to the 1960s. Why was this phrase in particular introduced in the constitutional text? While Morocco was obviously a Muslim country, there was no need to put it in there. Precisely, that was put in the constitution to make it clear that the constitution is a law, maybe the highest law that exists. This law comes as a consecration of something, the existing state of things in Morocco. And few things has to be stated that way in order to make it clear, because I don't want to go into too many details, but after the independence of Morocco, there was a case, a situation, which was very similar to that one of the deportation that we have been talking about. That was the Baha'is situation. You know that the Baha'is is a group of, they believe themselves Muslims, but they have the particular beliefs, and Baha'is, the Baha'is. The Baha'i.
They're not Muslim, right?
No, they say they are Muslims. They say they say they are Muslims, and they believe in their own prophet. They have things that are not at all coherent with Islamic law, and they try to convert people. So the government had to intervene, and because this reaction started at that time. I'm talking about late 50s, beginning of the 60s. And they were put on trial. They were condemned to death, which was not executed, hopefully. But that is to say that this issue has been there for a while. Morocco is, and probably this has to do with the fact that in the constitution, plus other things, it was stated that Morocco is a Muslim country of Malikite rite. The king of Morocco is not only the ruling king of the country. By constitution, he is also the commander of the faithful. There is a famous book which is entitled that way, Waterbury's book about the commander of the faithful, who says a lot of things. Anyway, the fact is that the king of Morocco is the commander of the faithful. And this commandment of the faithful does not extend only to the territory of Morocco, although we keep it within the territory of Morocco. There are some, you can, I have a Senegalese friend of mine who says that the king of Morocco is the commander of the faithful. Some people outside Morocco, because this has to do with history and how things evolved. This is very important for Moroccans, and this keeps the country together most of the time. This is what helps keeping the country together. That is to say that we are in a different situation than that of America. In America, you have a country where you have succeeded to, it's a religious country, definitely, but there is this separation between state and religion. And you don't expect, although I understand that America believes, a lot of Americans believe that America has a special role to play, as you stated a moment ago. But you have to understand also that some people say that the Arabs have a special role in the extension of Islam and the propagation of Islam, as it was revealed in Arabia. These are things that may have to do with certain state of things at certain moment of history. But nowadays, in this globalization world, where we want to find peaceful ways to live together, there is no way to come to any country or to any group of people and say, we want to change you. If you do that, the only reaction you will get is conflict. We don't want conflicts. We're peaceful people, and you are peaceful people. What we want is to come to common understanding. By your way of living, maybe you would convince me to become Christian. Who knows? Just by looking at you. If I feel that you are doing better things than me and that you are doing, you're such a good person and this helps you. But believe me, at this moment, I believe that my own practice helps me to be a good person. Doing what I can in order to live peacefully with others. So why do I need to change? No way. I think that's the difference, one of the differences between the two situations. I would like to add another one, which is, in order to conclude, which is very important and to which I referred during our meetings. When it comes to America, we're talking about America, #1 power in the world. We're not talking about some other country, 12 million inhabitants on 20, who is not #1 in economy, in politics, in military, in everything. We're talking about America. And we're talking about Morocco in this occasion, which is a small country, which is a country where there is poverty, there are problems, which we have to handle as a country and as Moroccans, which the government also has to handle in such a way as not to provoke disruptions and things that could turn out to be violent, both for Moroccans, and maybe this violence would be exported, as it is obviously the case sometimes through terrorism and in many parts of the world. So when we talk about these two countries, we cannot apply the same rules. You can't apply the same rules, or you're just being unrealistic and trying to do something that is impossible to be done. If you want a world, if someone wants a world which is different, where everyone would share some values, whatever your judgment about these values. We believe that we have the same values, but maybe might seem to be as being very central and crucial values, which do not seem so to us. If you want that, you need to have a world governance. I should have my word to say for the election of the President of the United States, for instance. As long as I don't have that, I don't see how we can come to a more equal and more respectful situation of the will of people. For the moment being, that's not the case, and I'm not sure that any American would accept that idea that I vote for the election of the President of the United States. So let us, as we are with our system, as it is organized, knowing that respect of human rights, basic human rights, respect of the basic freedoms should be also our concern, and we should apply them as you do.
Well,
So that's it.
To kind of come back and you're suggesting deep respect others, but no one faith is privileged. Is it accurate to say, deep respect for others, Islam is privileged, or
In Morocco?
agree, or, yeah, in Morocco, but would you agree or disagree? You have a phrase for a model Islamic context.
I would disagree with this said in this way. Islam is the dominant religion because it is, only because it is the religion of the majority, the largest majority, that's all. But any other religion could practice freely what it does, except for one thing, proselytizing. But any other thing, you can go to church, do whatever you like, educate your children the way you want to educate them, invite whoever lecturers you want to invite, come and talk about your religion and say to your religious fellow men and women, that's it. But if you are meaning by Islam being privileged that we don't want any other religion in the country, that's not true.
But I think what we're hearing as an American is kind of dissatisfying, because what we're hearing now, before we were talking about change, societal change. Now I'm hearing you say the status quo. This is the way it is. And one of the unfortunate words you continue to use is stabilization. Unfortunately, in the current context of the Arab world, this is something that we are all checking out and disagreeing with. Unfortunately, this is a word that was overused, for example, in Egypt, and is being overused. And in your case, this country is a unique situation. So to consistently, I would be very dissatisfied sitting in, Reverend Cizik's place, because what we're hearing is just let it be. And I think you were trying to say more than that, without talking about, it's hard. We're in a very difficult spot. And thank you for the floor. Madame.
Yeah, I want to react to that. It's I'm sorry if I made you feel that having this idea. When I talk about stabilization, I don't mean at all that we are against change. Of course, I was talking about Morocco. I was not talking about any other Arab country. And I believe also that in the case of Morocco, change is taking place, and it should continue. The pace of change might be different. We might have differences in what would be the pace of change, but I am a great believer in the necessity of change, and all we have been trying to do since the beginning of the 1990s in Morocco, from the political point of view and economic point of view, is to make our society evolve and change. By the way, I would like to refer to a book. Unfortunately, there is no, there is an English translation, but it's not published yet. I have conducted a collective work, about the 10 last years in Morocco, which is called Une ambition marocaine in French, Moroccan ambition, which appraises the evolution known by Morocco during these 10 years, and which explains, I believe, quite clearly to what extent in the field of women liberation, in the field of economy, in politics, in minorities' role, status in Morocco, all these things, how they have changed through law and through actions, effective steps taken by the king and the government. That is to say that I don't mean by stabilization that we should keep things as they are. What I mean is that things evolve by their own dynamic. There is a dynamic for things in any society. You cannot stop it. And this dynamic can go fast sometimes. Sometimes it needs a stop and go. And in many circumstances, the role of the rulers or whoever governs is to give that stop and go sign depending on the situation of things internationally and internally. For the moment being, Moroccan society is changing by all means and all terms. And there is no way to say, at least as far as I'm concerned, I never said and I would never say, let's keep society as it is, because this is a view, a completely idealistic view or stupid view at the end, because societies do evolve by their own dynamic, whatever we like it or not, whether we like it or not. The thing that I am really caring about is how to make this society evolve and change towards the right direction, and which is, for me, contributing better to a more peaceful society inside and outside with the rest of the world. That's what I meant. So we fully agree on that. I believe we have no differences of views.
Yeah, I heard you, but what I wanted to say is we don't favor any religion in Morocco, because Morocco was Jewish, then Jewish and Muslims, and then Christian throughout history. And if we did favor Islam as a religion, then we won't have churches open for prayers. Whoever wants to go and pray, including Moroccans that are interested in knowing what Christianity is, and we wouldn't have synagogues open for people to go and pray. So whatever we have in, in texts, official or not, does not really explain or interpret the reality in the country. And that's why we want to protect that. We want to protect our Jewish heritage, our Muslim heritage, and then the Christian, influence that came through Morocco. So it would be, I would find it a little bit offending as a Moroccan to say we do favor Muslims, otherwise I'd be sitting here with a burqa or not sitting here at all.
And that's why I'm looking for a statement that summarizes the religious pluralism, because there is the plurality. I mean, they exist. That's the Jewish Museum.
Yeah. The only one in the Muslim world.
I was part of a cabinet where I had a Jewish fellow who was Minister of Tourism.
And so in Morocco, that's one of the things that are very peculiar about Morocco. Since immediately after the independence of Morocco, a Jewish person was appointed as member of the Moroccan cabinet. He was minister, if my memory is good, of posts and telecommunications. And myself in the 90s was part of government where Serge Berdugo was Minister of Tourism. And it never came to my mind or to the mind of anybody to say, well, he's Jewish and still minister of a country where 99% of the population is Muslim. It was just natural because he's Moroccan.
But again, anecdotal evidence that we as Muslims allow people to function as part of our government and our society is not enough. It's not enough to say we had, in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, we had, Jews among us or Christians among us. I apologize. I'm really challenging as Muslims ourselves, but it's not enough. We're acknowledging minority status, and we're saying, and they should remain so in many ways. It's very difficult. And then even your comment to say that our religion doesn't predominate in some places, like in Morocco.
We're talking about Morocco. I'm not
Yes,
talking about the
yeah,
rest of it.
and then you mentioned, that if it did, you would be wearing a burqa. Well,
Or not being here
or
at
not,
all.
but I can't agree with that. I mean, why can't it be Morocco's Islam, and in Morocco's Islam, you are here, and I am
That's
here
what-
too.
Yeah,
And
that's what Catherine was
yeah,
talking about.
and you mentioned the type of Islam. So to take defensive positions, whenever we are put in defensive positions, we are not showing the best of ourselves, but at the same time, what positions are there to take? I'm very confused.
I think it's where I sense that the discussion is going off in some different directions. In Morocco, it has an official constitutional role of religion, but so do a lot of other countries. I mean, there are lots of Catholic countries where the Catholic Church has a role. Sri Lanka is, by its constitution, Buddhist. And, secular countries in Europe, in Norway and Sweden, the government pays the salaries of clergy people and maintains the churches, which I think to some extent is true in Morocco, that they're, public financing of the madrasa system and so forth. So I think you have to understand the complexities of it. But I think your point is the reality and the vividness of the commitment, which has not always been fully the case, to not only to tolerating other people practicing their faith, but to embracing and to the pride that Morocco takes in its diverse history is very important and is very distinctive and is different from many other countries in the region. And I think that's one of the things you want to build on. But this sort of the relationship between the state and religion. I was stunned at one point to realize that in the Netherlands, half of the curriculum of most schools are owned by churches, public schools, and half the curriculum is determined by a variety of different churches. So, you know, it's not as if it's one or the other. I think Rich's three states are a very good definition, but in that third one, there's a lot of room for all different kinds of roles in different countries.
Really, I was just trying to find, is there an agreement that we could have as a phrase that you and Idris would also agree upon to summarize the Islamic model that we have? You know, that's reality, yet also you would agree to. That was
I think that there, as Catherine points out, within the third model of pluralism, of covenant pluralism, in fact, where you agree to no one view, no one religion dominating, there are many mini models, ranging from Northern Europe, as she explained, to obviously Morocco, and at the other end maybe. But I'm not making a distinction or a comparison here as much as to suggest that American evangelicals aren't comfortable with their own model, as evidenced by the attitudes of the survey. Otherwise, they would respect the role of Muslim believers in America more than they do. Because it's a kind of disrespect to suggest that somebody else's religion, because it's not mine, has no legitimate place or doesn't fit within the spectrum of America's values. That is a disrespect if I've ever heard one. And so it's somewhat ironic that American evangelicals want to go overseas, fulfilling the Great Commission, and fail to see that their own society is more than enough to evangelize, and so there is, as I pointed out in Harrisonburg, there is a blind spot that we all have, and I would concede to a blind spot on the part of myself at times, on the part of evangelicals, and I would suggest that Dries would even concede to a blind spot of some Muslims toward evangelicals, if in fact they misunderstand and misrepresent the evangelicals. So we all have these blind spots, and that's part of the challenge, I think, of debating our deepest differences, to admit and then even confess our blind spots. And as children of God, we all fail to live up to our standards, our own standards. We evangelicals fail to live up to our own American ideals. Isn't that obvious?
Excuse me.
Yep.
I would like to follow on what you have just said. Don't you think that this religious bigotry that you have talked about, as evidenced by those frightening poll numbers that you spoke about earlier, isn't this religious dialogue confrontational in times of economic hardships, and tends to be evolutional in terms of economic prosperity? In the 60s, America accepted to have a Catholic president, and now they are doubting about the religious belief of their own president. What do you think?
We know that economic deprivation produces these consequences socially. I'm not a sociologist, but it's pretty obvious that during periods of tough times, they become victims of people's bigotry and attitudes, because let's face it, Americans without a job who look at immigrants say, well, wait a sec, you know, what rights do they have when I don't have mine? It's just natural. It's human nature. And so in tough times, that's the real test. Will we, in the midst of a war or two, as it were, respect the rights of Islam and Muslims in America? That's a real test. And right now, in my estimation, by evidence of the survey, all some, we're not living up to our own ideals. That's pretty obvious. And while there may not be the outright evidence of violence, because a lot of evangelicals, for example, on 9/11, called me up and said, I want to be a peacemaker, and therefore I will go stand with my Muslim friends at their mosques to say, I'm here to help protect you and your rights. And so many evangelicals did that. But we also know that there were preachers after 9/11 who were blaming a lot of others. And I know that personally, and that's why in 2003 we held an event that was intended to challenge the evangelical preachers to speak differently about Islam and about Muhammad the Prophet.
I think Dries wants to say what he needs to leave soon.
Yeah, I have to leave in a moment, but what I would like to say before I leave is that I believe strongly that what we are doing is a great thing. It is something which is important. It comes at the right moment. And I believe that we can do a lot in order to explain, to educate our fellow countrymen and women here and in Morocco, how we can live in peace, do things together in pluralism and in full respect of each other. You have here people who are, it's difficult. I understand that it can be very difficult towards some evangelicals or some people who could have very, views that are extreme views. We have our own. It would be false to say that all Moroccans or in the rest of the Islamic world people are open. There are people who are not open at all, and people who believe that you are the evil. This you have to have it in mind. Although I believe that in Morocco the situation is, generally speaking, society is tolerant, as a lot of people have witnessed, those who have visited Morocco, and there is probably a very particular situation, very special situation that makes the possibility of doing things together and working together and debating together about any issue possible and constructive. And that is thanks to the, I must say, also the political system and the way it is handled, the king being the commander of the faithful also. I think that's a very privileged situation of which we have to take advantage in order to continue this cooperation we are starting. Let me also refer to one thing that seems to me very important they said. I mean, from one side you have extremist people and we have extremist people. But there are plenty of good people, people who are open, tolerant. You can find them in religious circles, and you can find them in civil society and in all kinds of positions. Thanks to God, politicians also, most of them, have the same opinion, are of the same opinion, because the king, commander of the faithful, has also that opinion, and a lot of people follow this model. I don't like to talk about models. Usually when someone tells me this is a model, I react very, defensively, I must say, although we should not be defensive. I react defensively because I think that every particular situation has its own necessities, and you have to take care of that. But there is a possibility to find bridges and to find a lot of things that in common together that could help us work and show by doing things that it is possible. By the mere fact that we meet here or in Morocco, discuss, debate, and start some joint ventures together, by this mere fact, we are showing that if everyone being what he is, believing in what he believes in, we can still contribute to building a better world. And at this moment, building better relations between you people, your society, and our own society. And that's why I personally feel very much involved in this venture, and I am really very thankful to Rich and all of you, Michael, and all those who came to Morocco. And when we started discussions about the Casablanca Institute, Catherine Marshall, with the first meeting we had in Washington, and I can only say that I'm very grateful. And this is for me a unique occasion to continue saying and doing the same thing I've been doing all my life, which is to create bridges between people from different countries. I am no evangelist nor Muslim theologian, but I feel every one of us have a mission in this world. And one of my missions, I believe, is to bring people together who can have different views, can have different cultures, come from different backgrounds, but still do things, or succeed to do things together. That's my belief, that's my faith, and that's what I am trying to promote at this very moment we are meeting in. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, but I have to leave.
I think we all have to. Thank you, my friend Dries, and thank you all for coming. Catherine, would you like to close us out?
I'll just pass on the regrets of Tom Banchoff, who's the director of the center, that he couldn't be here. He sent you his greetings. And I hope we'll be able to continue this. This was, I think, a very fascinating, very real exchange on what can sometimes be a very abstract issue. And I think we all learned a lot, and wish you well in the continuation of the Casablanca Institute. And come to Fez in June. That's my baby.